What's up, music fans of the internet? I'm Derek.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're last week's album. We're bringing you the only reviews with two different views. And this week we're talking about Leave Me Alone by Hinds. And we're asking the big question, will their debut leave listeners saying mucho gusto or hasta luego? All right. So cheers, Kevin, and everyone at home.
Cheers, Derek, and everyone at home.
All right, so Hinds is a quartet from Madrid, Spain. Originally started in 2011 as a duo under the name Deers, but they had to change their name when a lawsuit was brought forth to them by a Canadian band of the same name. Hinds, the new name, means female deer. This is their debut album. So without further ado, let's talk about what it sounds like. Kevin, what did you think?
I think this album sounds like Joan Jett going surfing in the afternoon with Mac Demarco. What do you think?
I think this album sounds like the Strokes and Those Darlins gather around a Ouija board to channel the Kinks. Let's talk about some highlights and lowlights. Kevin, why don't you start off with some highlights?
One of my favorite parts of this album is actually the lyrics. I find a lot of times when someone's singing in English and it's not their first language, you end up with this strange poetry that just kind of doesn't work but works. And I think these girls are a good example of it. How many secrets you have that keep you smiling that way? I need you to be around my legs. And this song called Fat Calmed Kiddos. I don't think you would end up with any of those phrases if English is your first language. So makes for a really interesting mix lyrically.
One highlight for me was in Castijadas and El Ranadero. In one verse, the dual vocalists really mixed things up as far as how the vocal lines interacted. At one point, they're exchanging lines back and forth. And then later on, it's kind of like a vocal round. They're singing their different lines at the same time. And then ultimately, they join up in unison right before the chorus. And I just thought how that all interacted made for just fantastic moment. Conversely, I thought a low light for me was a lot of the same sort of lo-fi sounds. I thought at times it got a little repetitive, but I'm excited to kind of see them grow at some point, going down the line. Although, to be fair, this is their debut album, so,
At times I found myself, wishing for a bit more variety and depth, not only in sound, but also in lyrics. A lot of it's kind of adolescent themes of love. So while I guess the phrasings were interesting to me, the topics weren't so much. I do think they're still sort of figuring out their sounds, and at times still sort of learning how to play. I almost feel like we're listening to them learn to bass their instruments to get better. And so that, for me, was a little bit of a low light. I wish maybe they're a little bit further along. But to your point, debut album.
So that brings us to the overall rating and answering the big question. Will Hinds' debut Leave Me Alone leave listeners saying mucho gusto or hasta luego? Kevin, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I'm going to start with overall rating. I think amidst the sort of overabundance of garage rock, lo-fi bands, especially in the past few years, I think Hinds actually managed to sound pretty unique. And I think for a debut album, it mostly lives up to the hype surrounding the band. Their amateur sound can be really charming at times and other times a little grating. But I think that's part of what makes Hinds so interesting is their sort of hard on the sleeve amateur approach. So I will give this album a 3 out of 5. I do think it will leave people saying mucho gusto. I think it's hard not to like Hinds. I'm excited to hear this band grow. I think they've got good things in store. What do you think?
Well, I'm just going to start with the big question. I think listeners will say mucho gusto to this. They do have a lot of enduring qualities to them. The dual vocals add a lot. The lyrics I thought were very strong for a lot of the reasons you mentioned earlier. Something that's very emotionally relatable, I guess you could say. So I don't know what it is, but there's something about them, some sort of charisma that exudes from Hinds. And for that reason, I'm giving their debut album a 4 out of 5. So there you have it. A 3 from Kevin, a 4 from myself. So that's a combined 7 out of 10. So don't leave me alone. Go pick it up, check it out. And thanks again for joining us here at last week's album, where we're bringing you the only reviews with 2 different views. Don't forget to subscribe. Shout out to the podcast. As always, I'm Derek.
And I'm Kevin.
Cheers, everybody.